Wow.
Good morning. Oh, that's nice. My name is Rebecca Davis, and welcome to church. Thank you all so much for coming. I just want to issue a caveat in advance, and that is that this panel is titled Queer Anxiety. So this is going to be a real gay discussion, right? It says that right there on the tin. And obviously you don't have to be queer to be here. We are an affirming and inclusive safe space. But this is fair warning that we are going to be focusing on queer identity and experience. So nobody must come up to me afterwards and be like, why were all your questions about gay stuff? Because that's literally, that is literally why we're here. Okay? Cool. All on the same page. It's my great honor to be here today with three very distinguished and talented panelists. On my left, we have Dr. Lwando Scott, who is a sociologist and writer whose research focuses on queer politics, cities, and heteronormativity. He holds a PhD from UCT and has been recognized internationally as a Yale Fox Fellow. And he is quite foxy, I think we can all agree. Oh, kind. Nkgopoleng Moloi is a Cape Town-based writer and editor of Art Throb, whose work explores cities' mobility in contemporary art. She's curated exhibitions on queer life and movement, including practices of self-fashioning. Thanks so much, Nkgopoleng.
Thank you.
And then finally, Pieter Madibuseng Odendaal, you're going to have to explain the Madibuseng, I think, is an award-winning poet, translator, and educator. His collections, asof geen berge ooit hier gewoon het nie. Woo! My partner is Afrikaans, and my Afrikaans just never gets any better, except if I'm 3 wines deep. And Ontaard have just won major South African prizes, and his new English selection, A Corpse is Also a Garden, has just been released. So please welcome our panel. So the topic of this panel, again, is queer anxiety. So I thought I would just start by sort of cutting to the heart of the matter and asking each of you, do you experience queer anxiety? By which I mean not just being a queer person who is anxious, which is me, but experiencing anxiety directly related to queerness. Who wants to kick us off?
I can go. Yeah, I guess maybe just also to give a little bit of a disclaimer, and maybe that will lead into a discussion around different types of anxieties. That primarily, my work is, I'm not a queer scholar, right? So I'm not kind of out there like deliberately detailing and thinking about queerness every single day. And so a lot of it does also kind of feel abstracted sometimes, that you are thinking about your own lived experiences, but also kind of engaging queerness in like very abstract terms as well, right? Kind of like as a theory, as a practice, as a way of thinking about like a methodology even. So really exploding the term queer beyond just kind of a self-identification, but also realizing that it's inherently systematic too. So when I think about queerness, I don't think about my queerness, but I think about queerness more generally and more broadly. Yeah, so I always kind of feel weird because I'm like, I'm not necessarily talking about my queerness, which is part of the story, but that's not kind of where the impetus is coming from.
That's a pity, because all my questions are about your queerness.
Oh, shit. Yikes. I guess I'm done.
No. Thank you so much. Pieter?
I mean, as you were saying, I'm not talking about you being queer and having anxiety. My question is like, how much of my anxiety comes from being queer, actually, you know? But so thinking about growing up as a young boy in Bloemfontein, a very conservative society, and the kinds of anxiety that I experienced being queer, not even knowing that I was queer, but kind of, you know, being interpolated by my peers, and how a lot of that kind of mental health issues that I've carried into adulthood seem to have stemmed from those ways in which, where I grew up, I was kind of pushed to the margins and bullied and, you know, put out there. So I don't know how much of my anxiety comes from being queer, actually, but I think there's a large portion of it.
Is your writing cathartic in that way?
Yes, it has been, especially with my later work, where I really kind of went back to those memories and those kind of first encounters of queerness, and tracing back where a lot of my issues in life later stemmed from. So yes, I think it does help to write about it, but it's not necessarily something that kind of takes away the anxiety, because that anxiety keeps flaring up when you get into spaces where you're suddenly, I'm not as welcome here as I thought I was. And also how much of that anxiety for a lot of queer people comes from their own family, from those intimate spaces where you cannot just feel at home where you're supposed to feel at home, right?
So I suppose one can answer this in multiple ways. I thought about, there's a piece in They Called Me Queer, which we spoke about a little bit yesterday, that I contributed, which is about leaning into one's queerness. So as a younger person, I think I experienced perhaps anxiety around one's queer identity. But it is through actually reading and writing and being immersed in the academic world, for me particularly, that you discover all these ways in which this is actually a source of great things, right? And so, as you were kind of alluding to, Nkgopoleng, you come up in the world thinking, queer as a kind of paralysis, if you want. Something's missing, something's short, you're not the same as others. And this is kind of, society projects this towards you as a source of weakness, right? As a source of, something's wrong. And so I think, being in the academic space and, of course, growing up and then having a sense of community outside of where I grew up, I particularly started seeing queer as a potential, queer as a possibility, and then I built a whole academic life around it, right? And of course, as you expand and as you see things, you discover people whose art practice is also surrounded, right? And so you begin to see queer as a liberating project, rather than a source of paralysis or non-being, if you want. And it doesn't necessarily. I think I agree with you here, Pieter, that there remains, I think, a kind of, I don't want to say fear, but a non-completeness, which I don't necessarily think is a bad thing, because I think that one can draw a kind of productivity from that non-completeness, because I think part of the failure, actually, of heteronormativity is that there's a surety there, right? That, heterosexual people walk around the world, being sure of themselves, which is in actual fact a fallacy in itself. And I think that for the queer can be quite productive.
That's such an interesting point. Nkgopoleng, you've given a sort of disclaimer. So I want to ask, to what extent does queerness shape your work? It seemed from what you were saying that maybe it's not a huge consideration for you.
Well, maybe let me be a little bit clear. So I like that you talk about this idea of kind of non-completeness and kind of thinking about lack and spaces of kind of possibility. And I think as soon as you said that, I went back to my answer and I was like, yeah, it's the fact that you have to kind of pre-position things with even like, here's a caveat, here's a disclaimer, right? Which can also be an important part of the conversation or an important part of like how the work gets done. But what I was trying to point to there is that not only am I kind of necessarily thinking about detailing lived experiences around queerness, but I'm also kind of thinking about it more academically from a philosophical point of view, and how that then informs artistic practices, for example. So primarily my work is centered around visual art. And writing those histories through the lens of visual art. And so what that means is that it's always centered around art objects, it's always centered around kind of events such as exhibitions, surveys, retrospectives. And so that often then becomes the nugget from which you can think about different things. And for me, that includes how do you think about queering within that space? How do you think about kind of exploding, like I said, the definition of what it means to think about queering as a verb, as a methodology, as a way of living. And so the disclaimer is kind of this idea to say, yeah, the art object is the thing that then produces ways of how to think about queerness and how to navigate that. Yeah.
Pieter, do you worry about being pigeonholed? And this is actually a question for all of you. Do you worry about becoming, you know, the queer X, the black queer X, the Afrikaans queer X?
Yes, I mean, I've already become that in a way, you know, so that's why I was asked to be on the panel, you know.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we'll ask Pieter, he's more for he'll talk about it. So yes, there is that. But I mean, generally, that's kind of how people seem to try and make sense of new writer or artists as they emerge. Okay,
Sure.
so we put you, oh, you're into eco-poetry, okay, that's, oh, you write about queer identity, that's who you are, you know. And so, yeah, but I just want to kind of latch onto what Lwando was saying about this, like the, you know, the liberatory potential of self-making, of queerness and so on. I was in Brazil at Lady Gaga's concert on Copacabana, yes, in May, and you know, there were like 2.5 million people, the vast majority of who were queer, and you know, people were shouting like, gay, 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 and I was just like, oh, this is what it feels like to be straight, guys. You know, just to like have that whole world around you where so many people's way of living and loving reflects you, you know, and that really kind of shifted something in me about that guys, I mean, it is hard to be queer. It's not an easy thing, and you keep on getting pushback from the people around you just for the way in which you are, you know. So yes, and that's why we have to kind of cling to these ideas of you know, the liberation that queerness brings, and to make ourselves strong enough to face this kind of pushback that we keep getting, you know. And sometimes we also create bubbles where we feel safe and we feel accepted, and like the world is like this, and then suddenly, like me, I work in Potchefstroom, and then, you know, people look at me and my partner when we walk in the mall, and I'm like, okay, you know, there's lots of things going on here still. Yeah.
How about you, Lwando? Pigeonholed?
Well, yes, but I love it. I mean, I mean, I get why, you know, if someone wants to not be, you know, I can get, you know, the idea of being ghettoized, right? But I maybe perhaps it's an age thing, but I don't think it is. It is, I think, a more philosophical thing in terms of, I love it when I go to a bookshop and I go to the queer section or to the, you know, I love it when I go to a city and they say there's a street where there's just gay bars and gay bookstores, and, you know, I think that perhaps, I mean, again, you know, people who are now coming up in the world don't feel that all of those things are necessary. But I'm very ambivalent about the desire to make us the same, to make us not visible, to make us to make the queer, you know, well, this is not important, you know, we're all people, or this is not important, you know, we accept everyone. I'm quite ambivalent about that politics, because I think that the queer is still, it produces a discomfort that then warrants a kind of erasure. And I think that the politics of, we don't need, gay bars, everybody can go to the same and we can all be. I think it's a wonderful San Francisco projection, which is not the reality of Cape Town and South Africa. And so for me, yes, I write about queer things, and I want to be in the queer panel, and I want to speak about queer lives, and I want to read about queer lives, and because I think queering has a very particular project in my life, in South Africa, in this city.
Well, let's talk about queering. Nkgopoleng, you were talking about queering as a verb. What do you mean by that? How do you understand it?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of ways to think about it. So a note that I have here is around what I would consider strategies of evasion, in the sense that, well, let me just read the whole thing and then I'll kind of go into it. But for me, I think of it as strategies of evasion, subversion, illegibility as a form of escape, but also kind of playing around with expectations of narratives, certain narratives that are placed on you, and kind of finding modalities to render yourself unstable and readable, and that being a way through which you can move through life in a safe way. So I'll use an example with the QP archive, which is kind of where the exhibition that you spoke about centered around. My interest in this archive, obviously by now a lot of people know it. It has kind of been historicized and kind of shown, which is really brilliant. But one of the things that really touched me about it was how the woman was so smart, either intuitively or, through conversations around themselves, in finding these tiny strategies of how to be safe as queer people in the world. One of them was glamour and beauty, that they felt that if they could make themselves beautiful and glamorous, they could use that as a tool to be able to be left alone. Of course, that has nuance, because it's like, on the one hand, what is beauty? On the other hand, what is glamour? But also just kind of realizing that queering as a verb also implicates the person, because there's some labor that has to be done there. Even to make yourself glamorous, you're working. You're not just kind of waking up like I showed up like this. There's a lot of labor that goes into that. But then how does that labor then become a labor of love? So for me, it's like these things that either we have to do with each other or to each other or for ourselves that allow us to be queer people in the world. And sometimes that means like not showing up as a queer person. And sometimes that means that showing up as truly yourself as a queer person. Like, listen, this is who I am, you can see. So I'm interested in kind of those like tiny loopholes and evasions and like unexpected things.
That just reminds, that like what you just said now about beauty. There's an amazing piece, I don't know if anyone here has read, by Christina Sharp, who wrote the amazing book In the Wake. In the piece, it's called Beauty as a Method, and she writes about her mother and the ways in which her mother, fostered and tried to create beauty in their house with what they wear, etc., etc. This is, of course, in the context of Black America, of course. But she quotes in there Saidiya Hartman, who writes in Wayward Lives, beauty is not luxury, it is the creation of possibility.
Love.
I too use glamour and beauty as a strategy to be left alone, but I don't think I'm doing it right. Let's get back to the gay bars that Lwando was talking about. Do you, not specifically that. I'm getting there with the question. Pieter, do you experience yourself as existing within a form of a queer community, or do you mostly operate in sort of heteronormative spaces? I mean, you live in Bloemfontein.
Don't say it like it's such a terrible thing. It's not okay, Rebecca.
Is there a queer scene in Bloemfontein?
Yes, there is.
Okay.
I mean, there are queer scenes everywhere, guys. Queer people
enough.
are around. Doesn't matter how small that town is, you're gonna find someone there. And yes, you do gravitate towards those people because those are the people that get you in ways that others don't. There's a lack of need of explication and of posturing that needs to happen. You know, you don't have to make yourself beautiful to be in those kind of spaces. So yes, I mean, I was staying in Potchefstroom for 3 years, and there, definitely, that was the only thing that kept me alive in that very masculine, conservative, Christian, racist, homophobic space. And that was the other queer people that I managed to surround myself with, and to, you know, have a karaoke night on Friday evenings, because there's no spaces where you can go out and feel comfortable and not feel, but you create that place where you can just like relax and be yourself. So yes, definitely. I mean, that's always what I'm doing if I'm in a new space. Find the queer people, because then you find your home, right?
Yeah. What about you, Nkgopoleng? Do you think of yourself as being part of a community?
Yeah, this is really interesting because I was going to say something counter, and maybe it's it's the idea of like comparing the different cities or kind of different places in different cities. One thing that I think is quite problematic is that in major cities, or what we might call like centers of the world, queerness did become cool without necessarily embodying the ethics of what it means to be queer. So kind of taking on queer aesthetics, maybe for profit or for clout or other things. And so there's also a way in which sometimes we forget like the discrepancies between being a queer person in Cape Town versus being a queer person in Joburg even, or even in Cape Town. The other day, some friends of mine took me to what they called a lesbian bar in Table View.
Wow.
And it was interesting because there were like no lesbian people there. It was just like, it's like, what's going on? Yeah, so it's just like these tiny different things that are, you know, you call it something because you know that you're going to gain benefit from it. But then also to seriously, this is why the point of like my queerness versus queerness is so important to me, to kind of thinking about like being a queer person in Lagos. Like you could die saying I'm going to a gay bar, me and my gay friends are just going to go hang out, you know, which is completely different to in Cape Town. That's cool. Like, oh, you know. Yeah, so that's kind of what I was thinking about, these differences between where you are in the world and what that means.
Well, let's go into that a bit more because it's really interesting. I mean, do you think there's a difference between the Joburg queer scene and the Cape Town queer scene, for instance? And if so, what is it?
Thorny.
This is being recorded. Yeah, well, I lived in Joburg for about 5 years pre-COVID, and I think at that time we were lucky enough that Braamfontein was thriving.
Yeah.
And it felt like a place where people could be allowed to kind of be themselves in different versions. I mean, Kitcheners as an establishment, yeah, you know, kind of allowed places like, kind of expressions like that. But I think since COVID, the city has changed a lot. People are a little bit more kind of retreating. So I have no sense of what the scene is at the moment.
What do you think, Lwando?
What do I think about what exactly?
The difference, the differences in the scenes.
I mean, so I mean, there are different answers to this question because I love both. I love Joburg. I love Joburg. I think that particularly if you're a black person in this country, there's something about Johannesburg. Landing at OR and especially now that I've lived in Cape Town for most of my adult life, landing in Johannesburg and you know, and exploring the city is very different. The cities have very different energies. But I'm a Cape Townian at heart, I think. But I love Johannesburg. So the cities are definitely very different. And I think also the queer articulations in the cities are very different. I think that, yesterday or the day before, Friday, there was a queer celebration talk here, and I think Janine brought up some very important things about the intentionality of creating spaces for queer people of color in Cape Town, right? Creating spaces that are not just, whites only, Greenpoint kind of spaces. And I think, in Johannesburg, that's almost a given, right? In certain, and so then if you're coming into a queer space in Johannesburg, that there's a different approach. And then also to say, there was a period, I remember, where, there were basically pride wars, right, in Cape Town and Johannesburg, and they were spatial, they were racial, they were, and of course space and race in this country runs along parallel lines, right? We know because of our history, and so I think that you can't. For me, the queer question that is then placed on the cities is not devoid of all of these other layers of intersection, right? One wants to think about the disruption of Johannesburg Pride in 2012, right? It was incredibly pivotal. I was an incredibly young scholar then, and I remember thinking about that moment and thinking about South African queer politics. And so for me, to think about the two cities and to think about queer lives is to actually think about South Africa.
Yeah.
And the ways in which the queer cannot be divorced from the wider politics of this country.
Absolutely. I want to give some space to talk about and honor your work. I thought the best way to do that was just to ask you to tell us each about a recent work of yours, be it a poem or an exhibition or a journal paper, whatever, that you are the proudest of. Pieter?
Oh, wow.
That I'm the proudest of? I like this one.
Would you care to read for us?
Yeah, I would love to read just something that maybe captures, talking about spaces where queer people can gather. So my uncle, this book is dedicated to him. He passed away about 4 months ago, and he married a woman, had 2 children, and then at the age of 40, he was like, okay, I'm done. And he moved to Durban, and he opened a gay club. Yes. Oh, wow. And lived his best life, and he kind of, opened the way for me also in our family as a younger queer person. Anyway, and so this is after a night in his club. Escape eThekwini for Tuami. Early morning sick buds lie like abandoned kisses on the deck. The staff, my uncle and his lover, snore away after 4 a.m. closing. The drizzle still glimmers on the railing's lips in the morning sun that mostly doesn't shine for us. How many queers clipped off their accessories last night before sneaking home to count stars against the ceiling until dawn, searching for a livable planet. Later, your coarse palms, unending smile, we heave in the dark room, reach out for something holy, something that will save us, my warm, throbbing hero. Tonight, we drink body shots, our bloodshot eyes see far, our hips become hurricanes, lips pout like raspberries for a mouth or cigarette. We plummet through the splintered hands of strangers who love us as little as we love ourselves. Tomorrow, we'll cough awake the day, but our hearts refuse to forget the beat. We strut to sweat our shit away. So stand closer under the disco ball. Soon we'll disappear like water when the sun swallows us whole and kneads us into clouds.
Wow.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pieter.
I'm gonna let Lwando go first.
This is a very tricky one.
I'm just inviting you to brag about your work.
To brag. You know, I've moved on. Okay, maybe this is what I'll say. So I've recently been part of a project with rewiring from. Anyway, let me just say this. We've recently put together an exhibition, me, Temi Schaefer, and Rory Tsapai from the Zeitz. It's called And I An Evolved Fish, and it's at the CHR, the Center for Humanities Research at Yatsiba Lab, which is in Woodstock. It's a UWC building. And the exhibition is exploring bodies of water. So we're thinking through bodies of water and fluidity, and we're thinking about gender, particularly through bodies of water. So the whole exhibition is about that, and it's been incredibly exciting because it's my first kind of, coming into your world, Nkgopoleng, of thinking with art, thinking through art, because for most of my life I've really been textual as an academic, and so this has been really, really amazing to take academic thinking and use non-text text.
Very cool.
Beautiful. I unfortunately don't have anything as impressive to say. So I'll just point to a few things. One thing that I wanted to kind of speak about before we part is kind of the distinction between representation and like what I might call maybe like material, kind of material questions of like what things mean. And I always fear that how do I kind of measure the value of what I'm doing on a material level outside of just kind of talking representationally about things, which is important, obviously, because it matters. But there's also the other stuff that I'm really finding difficult to grab hold of. So personally, one of the things that I'm trying to be more intentional about, and I don't think I'm there yet, is to really think about like things like policy making or like rules or laws. Like how do those things actually function, and how do they affect, the queer community in a real sense, because I spend a lot of my time in the representational world, which is fun and interesting and exciting and important, but a big part of what I'm missing is like a real grounding in the root of like what does it mean, tangibly. So that's more of a personal project that I think is probably going to take some time. But one thing I'm really proud of is, so lately, ever since taking on as the editor of Art Throb, I've been able to kind of think through other people's projects as well. So the labor coming through, helping other people engage their thinking and their work, and then thinking about how to present that to other people in a way that makes sense. So that it's not just kind of like my own ideas. And I'm really enjoying young writers who are finding really interesting articulations of what queerness means for them and how they can navigate the city and how they can navigate their lives.
Can you give us an example?
Yeah, I mean, let me think. So last year we had, you might know them, Tasmir Pillay, who started The Death of Glitter, which is also an incredible institution, but also thinking about like fun and freedom and partying, but also really rooted in kind of, like I said, the philosophy and ethics of queerness. And they did a really beautiful piece reflecting on the QP archive. So that was a really kind of wonderful moment to see the work that Tasmir does, the article that he wrote for us, and kind of melding these thoughts in a way that is like really productive and beautiful, and then having people share that. But also just kind of small ways of championing other people who are doing, really incredible work. That's kind of where I am.
I'm really glad that you brought up that point about kind of material, tangible stuff, as opposed to, as you say, I don't know, discourse analysis, for instance. So I wanted to ask you to bring you into my world a little more about politics for a second. And I'm curious to know from you guys if you think there is any political party in this country that really walks the talk when it comes to queer rights. Or maybe just rank them from bad to worse.
Who, guys? Who? No, I don't know. I don't think so. I haven't felt that. I haven't sensed that. But I mean, it's a bit of a tangent, but I spent some time in Peru. My partner is Peruvian, and just coming back from there, and, same-sex marriage isn't legal. So our South African marriage isn't acknowledged there, right? And that creates all kinds of complications for us to be able to live there, create a life there. And so there are a lot of things that I think we often forget as South Africans that are quite, there's not... The rights we have and the policies that are in place aren't always implemented, but at least they exist. They are there. There are frameworks. There are things that we can fall back on. There are things that we as, that activists can insist on and can claim, whereas this is not the case in a lot of places in the world, including in Peru. So even if I don't see a political party that I feel, this party represents queer people or explicitly fights for queer people's rights, we do have other things that we can draw on that not everyone does. So,
How about you guys?
Yeah, God, politics, politicians, parties. I mean, God. There's clearly, I appreciate your point about, the existence of law and all of those things, and of course they are great and they're necessary. And there's limits, right, also to them. I don't, the politics in this country are so uninspiring and so unimaginative. I mean, and in terms of, when I'm immersed in the world of thinking about the queer, and I think that there's so many interesting and fabulous strategies these fuckers could be using from a kind of queer theoretical, point of view positions that could, liven up our political discourse and political place to be. But I think that, I can't even think of one political party because, I remember the debacle of, the FF saying one thing and then inviting that other fucker to come and speak at UCT. And so it's like, you have these contradictions and these, the ANC was basically forced to enforce, same-sex marriage. If without the courts, I don't think that would have happened. So again, your point, very important. Perhaps the question is, what are we as the queers doing in the political realm, right? What is our force, or what is our productivity or actions, etc. And I hear that I've been reading that there are, particularly the last election cycle, there's been some queers who have been smuggled into some positions of power. So, you know, maybe something is coming.
I know.
Yeah, so but I mean, as you can hear, I'm incredibly ambivalent about
The
politics.
DA is absolutely chockers with queers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
They are all over the show.
Okay.
But yeah.
Yeah.
Helen Zella was a drag queen on a show like a few months ago, like an Afrikaans show.
Folk queen.
There you go.
Okay.
I mean, what we really need is a drag queen for president, right? I think that's what we need.
Yeah.
No? Yes?
Yeah, that's yeah.
Nkgopoleng,
No,
any
that's
thoughts
serious
on that?
queer politics.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just say organizing. I agree with you. We need to start organizing ourselves and then inserting. But this is also what I was saying earlier, that things are always happening. Sometimes just because you're not tuned in doesn't mean the thing is not there. So it's my responsibility to know who's organizing, and I don't, unfortunately.
That's a
Yeah.
good point as well. Okay, just one more question, then I'm going to open it up for questions from the audience. And that is to all three of you, just a broad one, which is, if you could wave a magic wand and change one thing in your city to improve queer safety, what would it be?
Ooh.
Yo, magic wand.
I think maybe a way to make it impossible because often when we talk about catcalling, we think of it in relation to kind of femme bodies moving through cities, but it can also mean anyone who doesn't look the way that people think, kind of the normative standards, right? So you could be expressing yourself as yourself in the street, and someone will say something to you, even though they shouldn't. So if I could somehow make that, yeah. We're talking magic
be
here,
great.
so I'm allowed to
Yeah.
say ridiculous
Yeah,
things.
absolutely.
Yeah. Yes.
For me, I think it would be a kind of queer education in schools that's compulsory, that's part of the curriculum, you know, so that you as a young, because that's where so much of this anxiety starts, and where so much of that discrimination and the bullying, and so that's where it starts. So I think for me that's where I would want to intervene, you know, so that if I was like 8 years old and my teacher spoke about, you know, queer rights and queer people and queer representation, I think maybe I wouldn't have been bullied as much, or maybe I would have been stronger to deal with the bullying because I wouldn't have felt so invisible.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think perhaps for us to understand, or for people to see, this is magical, right? It's magic wand, yeah. To place or to enable people to understand queer safety as part and parcel of safety of everyone else, right? That queer safety does not exist in isolation. Queer safety is about women being safe from assault. It's about, you know, people not being harassed in the street. So for us to understand safety as not only a thing that has to be done or should be a privilege of some, but is actually something for all of us. And that then, and so when we think about the safety of people, you're thinking about, you know, the queer, you know, 13-year-old that is discovering themselves in their home. And so that safety is such an automatic, not automatic, but it's such a thing that even though you don't understand, you don't seek for them to be harmed, right? So safety is not this thing of, you know, that exists out there that we must implement, but safety is something that everybody wants for everyone else.
I like that. Okay, we have about 10 minutes or so for questions from the audience, and we have someone with a mic. So if anyone has anything.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for a wonderful panel. I'm not queer myself, but I was raised by gay parents, and I had the weird situation growing up of not wanting to be found out at school because you get bullied immensely for having gay parents, and it's a horrible thing of being so proud of your parents and your family and that kind of thing, but also for your own safety, is that having to go away from it. And I remember just feeling this joy of not just coming to Cape Town, but feeling like the world was getting better in terms of queerness in the mainstream and that kind of thing. I think what's happened now with politics in the last few years and all that is that because of polarization, because of media bubbles, fundamentally there is more space for queerness, but also it's not like an echo chamber, but the people who understand the basic human rights and civil rights of queerness are they listen to each other. And there's a huge group of people who do not get that, and their entire media environment is there to reinforce their hatred. And I feel so my question is, how is it possible now in today's world for queer media, for queer people, and so forth, to reach out to, or find a way to destroy that polarization or take control of the narrative in some way again? Because I feel the middle has been destroyed in a way that hurts everyone,
Great question. Any thoughts, guys?
Well, just a quick one. I think the it's a very hard thing to solve, or a difficult problem to solve in the current climate because of, we were talking about AI in the beginning, because the media landscape as it exists right now is and the people who profit from the ways in which it is designed right now lends itself and leads itself to exactly the kinds of echo chambers you're talking about. And so, and I think the only way out is us, as in when I say us, people, resisting the current world that we've been given, shaped by a very particular digital landscape that creates, as you said, echo chambers. I, for one, do not know how out of this, except if we shut these things down.
I completely agree.
I don't know any other out.
Burn it all to the ground.
Yeah, the algorithm creates that echo chamber, right? And amplifies, I think, those differences and radicalizes people even more. But then you're only talking to people that feel the same way about you, and then so I don't know.
I just wanted to tell a quick story. A few years ago, I was on a panel with the Nigerian writer Nathan John, who is queer himself, and he was talking about how he was at some community queer meeting in Nigeria, and this elderly woman came to the door and sort of looked very hesitant, and then she said, "Sorry, but I just really want to know what is this gay thing, right? What is it?" And he said because it was an in-person exchange, they could see she was absolutely sincere. She wasn't asking with any kind of homophobic intent. She just it was literally what does this mean? And he was like, imagine that online. It's just everyone would immediately come for you with the fire of 1,000 suns and call you a bigot and drum you out of that space immediately. And everyone just ends up more further radicalized. You know what I mean? There's just something about the in-person dynamics of that kind of exchange which are so much more of a teachable moment, if you know what I mean, than happens online. Sorry, anyway, kind of random. Anyone else?
Yeah, hi. Thank you for your contributions and your amazing work. My name is Nomonde. So my question...
love it.
Around anxiety. So I have a child that came out from a teenager. And as a parent, obviously, I struggled to find a community that caters for teens in Cape Town. So everything youth is 18 and above. So in as much as I'll do my own research, being queer, I work with queer people, I have friends who are queer, so it wasn't a wow thing for, we have an open house. But my anxiety was around, so from being tired of looking around, together we decided to create a space for teens. And because from the conversations at home, it would be like, oh, mama, my friends are saying I'm lucky to have a parent like you because I can just be, I can talk, And they don't have that, they live in secret in their own homes because, safety, bullying, and religion, culture, and all of those things that come to play. But my anxiety was at school, because the first question was, are you being bullied at school, name calling? So in as much as the name calling, we normalize it, but it has an effect on these teens, it gets, we normalize it like it's allowed because they've been called the gay one in class, and, but how does it affect them, So how do teens navigate around that? So I guess my other anxiety is, so here with us having to start this community for the teens, is at some point I'd have to engage their parents because we'd need consent, on a whole lot of things. These are teens we're talking about, 12 to 17 to be specific, but is on policies and law, because I imagine a future of young people who actually influence policies, who are radical about it and unapologetic because it's who you are. But how do we even navigate? Like we were just talking about political parties that are, and it makes me worried, truly. So where do we even, how do we, those are my questions. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, I can start, and then you can, if you want. Thank you so much for your question, and thank you on behalf of your little one that you are sounding like an amazing mom. So, I mean, I want to answer you in multiple throngs again. Sorry because it's because I think your question is actually not unlinked to the first question about the echo chambers, because part of the problem of the radicalization and the radical right and the ways in which it infiltrates institutions, including schools, particularly around trans rights, is incredibly forceful and present. I'm saying this to segue into places like the Triangle Project, right, that has been working with schools and working with communities all around Cape Town, runs into financial problems in terms of getting finance, etc., while radical right is flush with resources, right? So so your problem is actually indicative of exactly that, because Triangle Project has scaled down and had incredible programs in terms of going into schools, training teachers, etc., which comes back to what are we doing as community, as in terms of, I mean, if we want to be blunt, since the legalization of same-sex marriage, has there been a queer movement, right? That was forceful enough to get things like same-sex marriage, right? And then you get it, and then it's like, okay, now we're done. But actually, no, the work is just beginning, right? So to answer your question, so I'm answering your question in a sense, in a way that there's a lot of work needing to be done vis-a-vis, what we call NGOs, etc. But NGOs are suffering because of the defunding, and as you know, Trump and his ilk has pulled so much money, and the NGOs in this country, in this continent, have felt that blow. And so the kinds of work that would enable a mother to go, because Triangle, I mean, the services that are provided at places like Triangle, you will not believe. I mean, I hope you do know and believe, but it's amazing work for parents who are struggling with trans children, who are struggling with, all kinds of identities. And so policy, as you were saying, and doing the kinds of work that is unsexy, of engaging politicians and in order to have avenues where you can be able to get support. I don't know if that really answers.
Thank you. Other questions?
It's not necessarily a question, but it's a reflection as I was listening to the panel. My name is Olwetu. I'm from Guguletu, and the question of anxiety and what causes anxiety within our queerness. And I had a conversation with Umahle yesterday about most of my anxiety came from existing within the queer spaces. Queer people make me anxious as a queer. I say that because I did not necessarily ascribe to the preconceived ideas of what being queer is. I was not loud about my queerness. I don't wear rainbow socks and all of that. I don't go to Pride. Even though I understand the idea behind Pride, but it's not for me. And just because I don't go to Pride, I've always found that within the queer space, there was always questions about, are you lesbian? What are you? Are you even qualified to be within the space? Because I do not perform my queerness. I'm Olwetu. I'm Xhosa. I'm from Guguletu, and I happen to love other women. I didn't feel I had to perform that through my being, So the queer community caused me a lot of anxiety. And I remember I was walking in Rondebosch with my partner, and we were holding hands. So one of the friends like, "Oh, coming out, girl." And I was like, "Coming out from where?" Like, where am I coming out from? And then I had to have a conversation with this person, like, what do you mean, like, coming out? Like, what's that? Like, it's like, no, like, I see that you're comfortable now. I'm like, I've always been comfortable. I've always been me. Like, is me holding hands with my person now portraying that I'm comfortable? I've always been. It's just that I don't perform it. I'm just me. So I think we need to really, as queers, not everyone is going to be the kind of queer that you think queerness is. So we need to create spaces where different kind of queerness can exist.
Thank you so much.
So,
I think that's a great, great point. And a great note to conclude on, because we are out of time. And I just also want to say a thank you to the panelists, of course, but also a huge thank you to Open Book and to Mervyn and Frankie, who do so much, I think, to create safe spaces for queer people in Cape Town. So thank you all for coming as well.
Thank you.